Hello, welcome everyone.
Hello.
We are putting a link to the sign-in sheet right into the chat. If you would just take a second just to sign in. That's especially important for anyone who might be interested in sketches. Oh, we're so glad you could join us today. Today we are talking about unlocking student voice through opinion writing. Hopefully you are in the correct session. And I am Michelle Wagner. I'm one of the literacy consultants here at Wayne Risa, and I'm here with my amazing colleague, David Hales, who is a social studies consultant. So we have the opportunity to work together quite a bit just because social studies and literacy go hand in hand. So I'm really thankful to be able to learn from him and be here with him. So as we begin, our sessions this entire summer blitz have been really thinking about the whole child. And this is one of those pieces that we know is important, but that we've really focused here at Wayne Risa this year in particular, just in a way just to make sure that we're always being mindful of it. So I think Alan Beck said it best. He said, in teaching, you can't do the Bloom stuff until you take care of the Maslow stuff. And in other words, if students don't feel safe, if they don't feel as if they belong, then they're not going to get the algebra that we're trying to teach them, or the writing process that we're trying to teach them, or whatever it may be. So we want to make sure that we're taking care of their emotional needs before we just rush forward with content. When we think about this last year in particular, we know that kids have been through some stuff. We know that grown-ups have been through some stuff. And we just really want to just make sure that we're taking that time at the beginning just to build those relationships and make sure that those children feel that sense of belonging and as if the grown-up in the classroom really cares about them, because we know that we do care about them. But this year, even more than in years past, we just need to make sure that we're connecting with our students. And we know that that can be hard in a time when when we feel like we have something to catch up with. But in order to accelerate learning, we have to go slow with the relationships. We have to make sure that those children feel connected to us. So we just want to make sure that we're bringing back that idea that was presented in A Nation at Hope, just that there is so much science behind the fact that children learn best when we treat them like the little human beings that they are. And little human beings have social and emotional as well as academic needs. And we just want to make sure that we're being mindful of that and whatever we address. So even today, as we talk about unlocking student voice through opinion writing, we want to keep at the heart that the children are the ones that we want to hear their voice. We want to hear what they have to say. Finally, we want to make sure that when we think about them, that we're thinking about educating the whole learner, that we need to really think about who it is that's entering our classroom and what they need to be successful. So that might mean handing a child a breakfast in the morning because they didn't have time to eat before they came. It might mean those extra steps, or just asking a child how they're doing, taking those few moments just to talk with them and just make sure that they're okay, because we want to make sure that we're using everything about that child to inform our instruction and what we do in the classroom. If you're interested in learning more about the whole child, we want to just encourage you. We have a recording to the whole child model that is available. And then also on August 20th, we're just a shout out to Dr. Cynthia Cook, who will be doing an intro to social emotional learning. So if that's something that you're interested in knowing more about, that might be something just to consider attending. So that's a great session if you're interested. Great. Now, thinking about unlocking student voice through opinion writing, we want to make sure that we give ourselves just a minute to get kind of used to this idea of sharing opinions. So if you could just use in the chat, just share a quick activity to see what some opinions are. So this or that. So if you can just share if you're a top person or a bottom person in this picture. Are you an amusement park junkie, or are you more of a nature lover? If you could just take a moment to share that in the chat. Got some nature lovers. So maybe 10 more seconds to get your idea in there. So far, the nature lovers have it. Maybe I should just put in that I am a top person. I'm an amusement park junkie. And I'm one of those annoying people who makes my family match when we go. You'll have to wear matching t-shirts. All right, how about Burger King or McDonald's? Burger King, baby. Awesome. So we've got some ideas in there. Right. Thank you for sharing. So basically, I mean, obviously that's a silly activity. None of those are incredibly important in terms of the grand scheme of things. But what we all just did is we all had an opportunity to voice three opinions in a way that had very little cost to them. There wasn't a right or wrong answer for any of those. All voices were honored. Even when you said that neither of those shows appealed to you, or that maybe neither of the pictures of nature or amusement parks appealed to you, that's okay. All voices are honored. And when we talk about opinions, we want to make sure that in our classrooms, we are honoring those opinions, that it's a fate, that it is a safe space just to share our ideas. And I think when I think about 2020 and 2021, if there's any silver lining, I think that people are way more comfortable sharing opinions now than they were before. It doesn't take you long if you click on Facebook or TikTok or Instagram or Twitter to find out someone's opinion about something. You name it, somebody's got an opinion. Even my granny has opinions that she puts on Facebook. So I think, it's a different time, but it's a time when grown-ups are putting opinions, actually everyone is putting opinions out about any topic. And as you know, if you are on any of these platforms, some are better at sharing an opinion than others. But the bottom line is that opinions are truly everywhere. Everywhere we look, there are opinions. So when we think about this journey of teaching students to unlock their voice and to share their opinions in a written form, it's a journey. We can't just assume that kids are automatically going to be at the destination before we begin teaching. They're not coming to this space proficient in sharing an opinion. They don't come with three credible sources and a well-articulated argument. They're starting at the beginning. They're starting with something simple of pink is my favorite color, or I like blue, or I like to eat at Taco Bell more than Kentucky Fried Chicken. They're coming with simple opinions, but they're opinions, and we need to show them how to start to share those, because everyone has to start somewhere. But we always have to keep in mind that the end goal is that they will be able to share a clearly articulated opinion that can change the world, because that's who we have in our classroom right now. We have little people in our classroom that we hope will change the world. And if you happen to be with us and you're a secondary teacher, you have almost adults in your classroom who are ready to change the world. And we want to make sure that when they get out there into the world, they're prepared to do that. So we need to really think about what we need to do, what we need to teach in order for our students to be successful. And for this, I think about the Common Core. So Michigan adopted the Common Core standards, which we call the Michigan Learning Standards, in 2016. And when we think about those standards, we need to think about what it is that we need to teach for them to be successful. So in just a moment, I'm going to put you in a breakout room all by yourself. You will be alone. And I'm going to share a link with you so that you are able to just take a quick look to pull up your grades, Common Core literacy standards, and just review the opinion writing for the writing pieces. That's standard number 1. You can also look at the College and Career Anchor standard if you're not quite sure what you're teaching yet, and look at that first writing standard. Welcome back, everyone. Hopefully you had a chance to look over the writing standards for opinion writing in your grade level. But what we're really hoping is that maybe you saw that link between opinion writing and writing in general. So I just wanted to give you a chance, if you had anything that you noticed or maybe that you feel is super important in your grade or your classroom regarding opinion writing. Is there anyone who might want to share something that they noticed or saw or that they believe?
I teach first grade, and so I guess I don't really know the connection between writing, but I feel like it really follows like the standard like Oreo kind of format. Like you state the opinion, you provide a reason, like an explanation, and then kind of like a closing sentence.
Yeah, so it starts very simple. And I know that we have some high school or secondary people in the room too who probably see, like, we go all the way from there, just the stating an opinion. Blue is my favorite color. The sky is blue. I like blue cotton candy, all the way to an articulated argument by 12th grade. So hopefully we're starting to see that progression. I'm seeing in the chat too, lots of details just about what everyone teaches and those pieces that are so important. I see that we have a high school teacher with us today, a high school Spanish teacher, and how important it is for us to talk about the importance of being multilingual and how important it is to have that space for a second language to be taught and learned in our schools. Like, there's something that the opinions have to be well articulated, because sometimes there's people who push against that. With that, I'm going to throw it over to David.
Perfect. Let's talk a little bit of social studies here. We're going to build on what Michelle talked about in the context of social studies, what this kind of looks like and sounds like. Okay. If you joined us after we began, my name is David Hales, and I'm the K-12 social studies consultant here at Wayne Risa. I want to start off with the end in mind, right? I think we're used to doing that in education, and I think in this case, it's very appropriate for this particular topic. In Michigan, right, the four core are ELA, math, science, and social studies. So I'm going to ask you what may seem like a very strange question coming from a social studies consultant, but I'd like somebody to think about this and then actually, unmute, and we'll have some people share what they think. Why do kids have to learn social studies? I realize, in a four-man race, we would be number 4 in terms of attention that we get. But that aside, why do kids have to have social studies? Why is it considered a core subject? Could somebody unmute, or a number of people? Why? Why do kids have to have it?
They need to learn about the world around them.
Excellent. Okay. So learn about the world around them. Why else?
Well, I think that learning about the history of our country and the regions helps them to understand why people say, do, and think the way they do, because all regions don't think the same way.
Very nice. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I heard some geography in there, some history that's in there. Both are completely right. What else? What are other reasons why kids have to learn social studies, why it's needed?
Students need how to learn to be responsible citizens. When we teach civics, we teach them how to be part of a society. And, sometimes
Absolutely.
we look around today and we see people don't know how to do that. So it's really important.
Yeah, well, point taken. We've had a few examples of that, haven't we? For sure. Anyone else?
I taught 4th grade last year, and kind of the same thing with civics and knowing like the basic principles of the government. And regions was a really big unit in 4th grade. So learning about the different areas of our country and learning really how to read a map.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. We cover a lot of ground, right, in social studies. Could I see the next slide, please, Michelle? Oh, there we go. So this was mentioned, but this is sort of an all-encompassing definition. This is the end for us in K-12 for social studies, which is an engaged citizen. Now, responsible citizen, same thing. What are the characteristics of a responsible citizen? They're informed and they're engaged. And the reason that we're starting here is because everything that we're going to talk about with opinion writing is going to connect back to this, okay? And I want to sort of build that as we go along. We're all familiar that social studies, there are 4 sort of core content elements in it. There's history, there's geography, there's civics, and there's economics. But there is a lot more that really takes us to our end goal, which is informed, engaged citizens. So could I see the next slide, please, Michelle? So in the world of social studies, and again, you don't have to be a social studies teacher for this, I think, to be relevant. We're very much guided by something called the C3 framework, not to be confused by a popularly known curriculum called the MC3 curriculum. This is a nationwide document, the C3 framework. It's the college, career, and civic framework for social studies. So why do you care, right? If you're a Spanish teacher, why does this really make any difference? The reason why I put this out there is because this is a very influential framework for states, very influential for Michigan as well, whose intent is to really define what does powerful social instruction really look like? That if our end goal is a responsible citizen, right, which means that they're engaged and they're informed, how do we get there? What does instruction have to look like? Okay, what do we need to do? And right off the bat, I'm going to tell you this, and you're going to hear it sort of repeatedly embedded in what I are doing. An informed and engaged citizen communicates their opinions. And that's supported really by this C3 framework. So let's just dig a little deeper, okay? So Michelle, if I could do the next slide. So I just want to kind of show you how this sort of plays out. What this says is, okay, so given we want in a K-12 experience for kids to be responsible citizens, right? We want them informed. We want them engaged in the world around them. What does instruction have to look like if I'm sitting with my first graders or my middle schoolers or my high school student? What's that look like? And so all the C3 framework says, and I say all because it's pretty big and pretty powerful, is it says that good instruction really interconnects these four elements. And in social studies, we call them dimensions because, every discipline has to have its own lingo. So we call them dimensions. And what this means is, again, whether you're in a first grade room or fifth grade room or middle or high school, the good social studies instruction combines kids asking questions about the world around them, right? Just like Michelle was saying with us, right? This or that, what are you thinking about? What's relevant to you, right? Asking questions about the world that's around you. That's the first dimension. So questioning. 2, it's content-based, right? You're learning and applying content, right? That's the key. Learning and applying, which includes disciplinary tools as well. And that's a fancy way, really, of saying in social studies, you're learning how to analyze and interpret sources. You're being able to compare and contrast. And guess what? You're able to, in the third dimension, you're able to take a stand on something, or you could call it developing a claim or a thesis. I don't think it really matters the term per se, but in social studies, if you want to be an engaged citizen, you have to be able to express an opinion on something and back it up with evidence. And that means looking at a lot of information, right? So one of the dimensions is gathering and evaluating sources, not just from a textbook, but from literature, from video, from pictures, from newspapers, you name it, right? We live in an information dense world, right? We're just crushed by it. And trying to navigate that is not easy for an adult, and it's even more challenging for a student. But that's part of what a citizen does. What's relevant, what's not relevant, what's appropriate, what's not appropriate. And then the fourth dimension, and again, these are all intermixed here, says that, what? This isn't enough. A responsible citizen takes practice. It's practice, 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 right? Beginning right from kindergarten. And that means communicating what you're learning and taking some sort of informed action. Now, I know that looks a whole lot different to a K-1-2 student than it does to a high school student, but the principle is exactly the same. We're social, right? Social studies. You share what you've learned. You communicate what you've learned. So you need opportunities to share what you're learning. This is all the heart of social studies. So kind of started C3 framework, right? And then Michelle, if you could do the next slide. So if you look on the left, all this that I've been talking about is embedded in our standards. They're front and center in the social studies standards, beginning right from kindergarten, which is what you actually see here, okay? There's an element in every grade level which says it wants kids to identify and analyze public issues, and it wants them to communicate about a public issue, okay? That's a key thing to remember if you're in here, that regardless of the grade, those are key elements. Like, here's what I want to have you do, okay, is we're going to start off, it says it wants you to identify a public issue. And you know what? That's a little intimidating and can be a little confusing sometimes. So what I want you to do is, it doesn't matter if you're a social studies teacher or not, I want you to think for a minute at your grade level, what would you consider in your classroom, or again at your grade level, what would be a relevant public issue to your kids? So it's kind of a trick question in a way, because it's going to be different from grade level to grade level. What's a relevant public issue to your kids, your students? Can you give me some examples of you think what would fit? you're a first grade teacher, I know I forgot who said they were first grade. What's a relevant public issue to a first grader?
Um, what affects them the most right now is whether or not they can socialize on the playground,
Absolutely.
or if they have to be in their pods.
Very nice. So, so why is that a public issue, right? Because it affects their world, right? Their immediate
Right.
world, their community. So that's a very relevant to them. That's actually considered a public issue. Don't you think the term itself sounds a little intimidating? When you
Yes.
first see it in the standards, equality, individual rights, someone said, voter integrity. Those are probably going to be things for older, right? Older kids. Absolutely fine. What are some things that would be relevant in your classroom or your building that you think would be a public issue? So we've heard about whether they're in pods or not. How about let's take COVID out of the picture. In a normal year, if there is such a thing, what would actually apply, do you think, for your kids? Anyone ever have issues with kids on the playground when it comes to having enough equipment, or who uses what equipment on the playground? What's accessible? Yeah, what's a relevant issue for your kids that would be something that would affect them, that they would have an interest in at school or outside? We heard about pods, peer pressure, absolutely. I've had my kids express a firm opinion about what was available for hot lunch. Hey, who determines this? And do we get any say at all? Ooh, age of consent, interesting. Yeah, absolutely. So it varies. The key element for this, though, is it's what's relevant for your kids at their age. Okay. And you're going to know best, and quite honestly, the kids are going to know best because you're going to hear them talk about those issues. So what's this mean, right, in terms of our work here for social studies? If you take a look, can they go to lockers between classes or not? An excellent public policy issue, right, for kids. Because remember, we said it's all about practice, practice, practice. Look at these kindergarten ones, okay, for a minute on this page, and look at the first three, the P311, 12, and 13. Oh, right to search a car in a parking lot. These are getting really good. I want you to notice these elements that are here, okay, for the three, because it doesn't matter what your grade level is. Notice that the standard says that kids need to be able to identify an issue, right? Now this is classroom, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Identify an issue. Kids have to be able to gather information, right? And three, in this one for kindergarten, they have to be able to compare their opinion to somebody else, right? Because this is a process and this is a journey, right? We know adults that struggle with doing this. But the standards lay this out in a progression. And then check out the last one that's perfectly, I think, aligned with what we're doing today, which is sharing on a classroom issue, right? Having the kids share what they're learning, communicate. Can you go to the next slide, Michelle? So what I meant was, like when I mentioned classroom, is that some of you know this, if you teach social studies, that the context in which those standards are applied vary slightly from grade level to grade level, okay? So what I want to have you do is have everybody take a look at kindergarten at the very top, and it says the focus of the standards really is on classroom. What do you notice about the focus as it goes from grade 1 to grade 2 to 3, and at least I've gone through grade 7 on here, but can somebody unmute? What do you notice with them? What happens?
It gets wider. Like it starts off with like something smaller, and then it gets like, I don't know, kind of bigger. I guess
Yeah. Why do you guys think that's the case? Why do you think in social studies it does that? Why does kindergarten focus on classroom? And then we call that expanding environments model in social studies. But why do you think it's set up that way?
I think in kindergarten, it's so simplistic. They only can see their world. It's very confined and very small. And as they get older, they start to venture out and know that there's more than just their house, their school, their neighborhood, their town, their state. It becomes their country. And so as they get older, they're able to understand it more.
Yeah, absolutely. All kids in the beginning see the world in relation to themselves, right? And then ideally, you know, for lots of reasons, they move away and out farther from that, and it's reflected in this. Like I said, we call it expanding environments, but so what that means is in kindergarten, we saw they were analyzing a classroom issue, right? And they were gathering information and they were sharing it with each other. This just says that at each grade level, that expands out a little bit, with first grade being school community, you know, grade 2, local community. Now, what I like to think of this as, you know, if you're grade 3 and you're focusing on Michigan, you know, is it still relevant to talk about classroom issues? Oh my gosh, absolutely it is. But it's sort of like the starting point here, or possibly the ending point, right? Depending on your kids. The key isn't, I don't think, the topic as much as it is the skill itself, right? Of formulating an opinion, being able to back that up, and then having the opportunity to communicate that. And so it's going to vary slightly from grade level to grade level. By the time you get to high school, the kids not only have to be able to express an opinion, what do they call it, a claims or a thesis or whatever, and substantiate it with evidence, they have to be able to express an opposing view, an opposing argument, and they have to be able to refute that argument. Now, that is a far cry, right? Notice from, say, kindergarten, where they just had to express an opinion on something. But that's very appropriate, though, because it continues to slowly build all the way through. Can I see the next slide? Let's get the $1 million question here, okay? What I just explained to you has actually always been in the standards. The standards were updated in social studies in 2019. But you know what? That wasn't one of the things that's been updated. It's always been in there. So I'm going to ask you the $1 million question here, okay? And I'm sorry, there's no prize for this. But so if they've been in the standards, why has this not been done? Why do you think this really hasn't occurred? There's lots of reasons, but I'm just curious to get your take on it.
I think reading and math are prioritized above social studies.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Many years ago now, that there was a shift, probably beginning with No Child Left Behind. That didn't help us, right, by any stretch at all. So it sort of devalued, shifted away. Why else do you think this has been problematic?
Maybe people don't want to talk about controversial issues.
Yeah, there's always reluctance. You know, remember that in social studies, we're teaching kids how to think and how to talk about issues, but not what to think. But people are nervous about that, and I absolutely get it. So there could be, yeah, some reluctance to do that. Absolutely. What else might be a reason? How about, here's a hint. If you're a grade 5, grade 8, or a high school teacher in social studies, you might have some insight on this. Grade 5, 8, and 11 is when we take the M step. Let's face it, we all know the role that standardized testing plays, right, in determining what gets taught and oftentimes how it gets taught. So there's lots of, there's lots of reasons. I think the key thing, though, is through the C3 framework, through the standards, sort of a reevaluation for us in social studies of what it really means to be a responsible citizen and what that instruction really looks like. And communicating an opinion, boy, is a cornerstone of that. So flip to the next page for a minute.
And David, before you go on, I do see a
absolutely.
comment in the chat that someone just pointed out that some schools really rely on the literacy teacher or the ELA teacher just to teach social studies within the content. So kind of glossing over the actual standards and just kind of touching on social studies within literacy, I think, is probably the gist of that.
Absolutely. Thank you for raising that. Sorry I didn't catch that. So I'm going to have Michelle show the next slide. I'm going to tell you a little story, okay? And then I want your opinions on this, okay? I don't think anyone has heard this story. But it just to me drives the point home. So here's the story. A number of years ago, I was involved in a project with the State Department. Now, this is really dating me because I'm talking about early 2000s, to go to the country of Slovakia, right? So in the Balkans region, to work with K2 teachers. And the specific project was on how to teach kids about democracy, okay? So I went with actually a group of other educators from around the country, had a chance to work with these teachers. And so one of the grade 2 teachers said to me, and so I want you to think about what she said to me, and then I'm going to have you on mute and tell me, why do you think she said this, and how does it strike you? Like, what are you hearing? So this is what the grade 2 teacher said. She said, appreciate you guys coming, right? But she said, I just don't understand something. She said, why do you care what the kids think? She said, why do you care? They're second graders. They're kids and you're the adults. Why don't you just tell them what to think? Again, you're the teacher. Just tell them what to think. Now, you know what? That took me back for a second, right? I've never had anybody here ever express that opinion before. But it to me, it drives to this point, why does your opinion matter? So why do you think they said that? She's being a little bit detective here. And what do you think? Someone said in the chat that was very sad. Why is that sad to us? For anybody or that person.
I think the underlying purpose of educating is teach people how to function in the real world. And if all you do is rely on people telling you what to think, you will be lost and connived when you grow up. And even second graders should think for themselves, at least learn how to, and to some extent. I think things are changing too, and people are scared to let teachers influencing children's way of thinking is getting scary to a lot of parents. I've experienced it myself, and
sure.
It's very fine line between, there's a word out there, when you try and make others believe what you believe. I can't put that word on someone knows out there, but
like indoctrination, like
yes,
to indoctrinate somebody.
Absolutely. And it's never the intent, but if it could be interpreted that way, then it really becomes political and your job is on the line.
No, that's a really good point. Now, I'll be honest with you, to give you a little bit more background in their defense, or at least explain a little bit. At that time, they were not that far removed from being a communist country. So the teacher, when I talked to her later, explained to me that her evaluation, right? We all live in a world of teacher evaluations. Her evaluation was based on the degree to which she could get the kids to think what the state wanted them to think. Now, in a communist system, that makes sense, right? That was very much. So it made me realize, and I think it makes all of us realize, how crucial our work really is, and to not take for granted the role that an opinion is and being able to do this. Because if not, we fall right into that trap of what she was explaining. Now, in her case, again, it was more ignorance, right? Because they were trying to transition and she was just like, okay, I don't get it. Why does this really matter? And I just think, to me, it's always an interesting story because I just sort of take for granted sometimes that we value kids' opinions and want them to express them. So Michelle's going to do more with, okay, so what tools are there and what does this sort of look like and sound like as far as moving ahead? So I appreciate your patience with my storytelling. Thanks, everybody.
Well, and I think that, David, you brought up a really good point, that every opinion starts with a story, right? We all have a story that makes us feel a certain way, even those parents who maybe feel as if teachers are doing some indoctrination. Like, that's a story. They have a story that didn't just come out of nowhere. Someone has a story about that. I think that that's really important, that we think about the stories behind our opinions and question whether or not we're holding true to an opinion because of where we've been or because it's still true today. So I think that that's a really important thing just to think about and embrace. So when we think about the literacy standards, I know we had a chance to explore them earlier. I'm showing right now the first grade standard, and I'm just going to give you a second to read that. This is the anchor standard that takes us from kindergarten all the way to grade 12. And as you can see, this, we have it clearly there are stepping stones that will get us to the place where we want students to be when they leave for college. But those stepping stones are really important. And there's no place more than social studies that can give us a chance to express our opinions in a way, but because I keep coming back to that idea that we want them to be able to change the world. We want to empower those students, especially students from places where they may have been historically disenfranchised or not had a voice in the past, or maybe they come from places where not a lot of people go on to share their opinions publicly. We want to empower those children to have a real voice in society so that we can all work together to make the world what it should be. So if you could just take a moment to think about the last time you wrote an opinion. So an opinion that you wrote. And then if you could share in the chat what it was that you used, what tool you used to share your opinion. You don't need to tell us your opinion. What did you use? So I'm seeing lots of answers in here. And someone asked the question of, do I mean in writing? Can be, but I've seen some opportunities where people have voiced an opinion just verbally, and that's okay. Yeah, social media is a great place where we share our opinions. Sometimes there's a little bit too much opinion on Facebook or Twitter. Sometimes we can get bombarded by that. Text messages, we share opinions all the time with text messages. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing those ideas. But I wanted you to really just think about the fact that we share our opinions all the time, whether it's my husband asking, what do you want for dinner? Or whether it's giving an opinion at the ballot box on election day. We have opinions and we share those opinions in a variety of ways. Sometimes we share them publicly, sometimes we share them privately, but we're always sharing an opinion for a purpose. No matter what our opinion is, opinions are made for feedback. And so I think about that for just a moment. When you have an opinion, it is made for feedback. When we share an opinion with someone, we want them to do something with that opinion. There's an action that's associated for it. Very rarely does someone share an opinion just to share words. When someone tells you who they voted for, they're sharing it with you because they want you to either make some assumptions about their character, how they feel like they should be perceived in the world, or maybe they're trying to convince you that, hey, you should also vote for this individual. But whenever we share an opinion, we hope for action. When I told my husband Subway sounded good for dinner, my hope is that his feedback will be, yeah, that does sound good. You don't have to cook tonight. But we share our opinion because we want feedback. And when we think about feedback, I always relate it back to the classroom. John Hattie, I think, says it best, that the most powerful single modification that enhances achievement is feedback. In other words, the thing that teachers can do that will have the greatest impact on our students is to give some targeted feedback. Now, we're not just talking any feedback. It's not just simply I agree with you or I disagree with you. It's those taking that feedback and using it in such a way that we're nudging students forward so that they can make the tiny tweaks that they need to get them closer to the learning target. So in our classrooms, a lot of times we're using digital forms to actually write. So for example, many of you probably use Google Documents, especially during the last year, to have students write. One of the pieces that I just want to give you an idea of a way you can offer some feedback to students or encourage other students to offer feedback to one another is to use that comment function within Google Docs. There's also a comment function within Sheets and Slides if you prefer those. When students are writing, have them share their writing with someone other than you so that comments can be given. And when they share it as a view only or a comment only, students will be able to give a comment to a classmate without changing the content that they wrote, which I think is really important, especially when we're working with opinions. We want to make sure that students know, hey, we're not trying to change your opinion. And this gets back to that point about we're trying to teach children how to think, not what to think. And that's a huge distinction. So we want to make sure that we're giving those comments. Maybe we're saying things like, what other facts can you give? Where did you find this source? What information might convince me, the reader, to agree with you? So giving them those opportunities to actually share comments with their classmates in a way that protects the dignity of the original writing, but also provides a chance to respond. And one thing that I just want to point out, just kind of as a quick tech tip, is if you put a plus sign and then the student's email address, you can actually assign that comment to someone, which is really helpful when you have maybe something that students are replying to or giving comments to, that it's been a while since someone looked at that. So the email goes right to their inbox with a link to the document to which the feedback was given. Also would encourage you to think about having students record themselves reading their writing. This is especially important, I think, for littles, because a lot of times when you have them write their opinion is much bigger than their writing skills maybe allow for. So if they're telling you about who should have access to the balls at recess, their opinion might dwarf their ability to write about it. So we want to make sure that we're giving them the opportunities to share their opinion in a way that really still focuses on writing, but allows them to get out everything into the world. So having them record themselves just on a video or any sort of cell phone or any sort of device that you might have in the classroom, a tablet, anything, is really helpful. And one thing that I will say about young people, as a mother of 3, I can tell you they love to be on video. That wasn't something that I grew up loving, but my children just love it. And I think that that's pretty much a universal truth when you look at Instagram and TikTok and those pieces. They do like to videotape themselves. So giving them the opportunity to bring that into the classroom just to share their opinions. And then you can even throw these into a common slide deck so that students can watch multiple students' opinions, or you can even share it with a family and have families look at those opinions as well for their child. So if you choose to use the idea of putting it into a common slide deck, one thing that you can do within Google is when you put in a video, you can actually select that it comes from your Google Drive instead of YouTube. And then you can format it so that it starts and stops at a time that's appropriate. So that way kids don't have to do all of that video editing stuff. They take multiple tries to get it perfect the way they want it. You don't have to have them re-record a million times. You can just start the video at 4 minutes or at 5 minutes and 32 seconds. So that's really helpful so that you can do that. And that works really well so that when you're in present mode, it starts automatically right where you asked it to and ends when you tell it to as well. So it can be very helpful. When we think about this idea of recording students, I would be remiss if I didn't just mention that we want to make sure that we're being careful with who we share information. So all of the children that you've seen in this presentation have been mine, but so I have, as their mother, permission to share their images and their videos. But as teachers, we have to be a little bit more careful. And schools have done a really good job about getting those forms out for acceptable use of images and video. But I always still try and be just a little bit more careful with videos of children that aren't mine. And so one thing that's really nice about Google is we can share the video with exactly who we want to. So just in the same way that you share a document with one person or 10 people or within an organization, you can do the same with a video. And that's really nice too. So I'm going to skip through. Liam was going to give you his opinion about Dog Man. Spoiler alert, he loved it. But just having students share their ideas about books that they're reading, pieces that they're excited to share with their classmates can be a great way to start off your day. So encouraging students to read in your classroom, but then to share the opinion, hey, is this worth reading? Again, you're having students practice those skills of verbally describing an opinion and backing it up with reasons. I like Dog Man because there's a cool hot dog character or whatever it might be. Super important. And then if you have students write drafts beforehand, wow, that just increases the video's production by so much, but gives us real content in there. And this goes all the way up through high school. You could have students writing recommendations, book recommendations till they graduate, and then housing those in a common place so that students who are stuck trying to find something to read can go to a common place and find those book reviews. So it's just something you can do. And again, you can select who you share that with.
So Michelle, Rachel
Yes.
asked, can you record within Google Slides then?
You can't record within Google Slides. You can record within Google Meet. So if you had a Google Meet open, even if the child opened up Meet on his or her own device, they could record themselves. So in the same way that we're recording in Zoom right now, they could record to Google Meet. And then you can just basically paste that video into Google Slides. And then the last tool that I want to share, and I share this with kind of an asterisk next to it, because I would definitely recommend asking your tech person in your district. You always want to check with them about safety and protocols and just those things that, you just want to make sure that someone is giving you the okay to use some of these tools when it has a broader audience. But Google has a free blogging system called Blogger. So it's one of the G Suite apps, and it allows you to create a publicly visible blog that can be viewed by anyone. And so this is really nice because you can see how many people viewed it. You can check when it was posted. You can see kind of a compilation of the posts from the past. Here's an example here, and you can see it has just very nicely organized all of the links from the past. This is a blog that I wrote, and it's publicly available, but the nice thing for me as the creator is I get to respond to comments that are posted. Even though this is a while ago, I get to see it. And even though I don't consider myself, a professional Blogger itself, the tool, makes it look professional. And sometimes I think that professional look really empowers students. So sharing this tool as a way for them to share their ideas with a broader audience, whether that audience is another school class or first hour, third hour kind of a thing where they're reading each other's blogs and responding, can be very helpful. But then the caution with this is that it's publicly visible. So you'll want to just make sure families are aware of that. So you may have students may choose an alias for this one. And then if you want to keep the blog kind of internal, there are ways to use Google Sites to make a portfolio or a blogging space. And then the nice thing about Sites is it allows you to share with just a few people or your class. You can add each individual member of your class. So then the students within the class would be able to see each other's blog. So that can be helpful. And that can be a great way to house some of that stuff that students are creating. So those videos of students reading their persuasive piece, or just whatever it is that they have. It's a great way to share their writing, and then they can share it with the audience that you choose. So whether that's the class or their families, that's just a great way. And then with that, you can also duplicate the site. So if you as the teacher create a master, so you know exactly what you want in that portfolio or in that blog, you can then create one and then duplicate it so that students personalize it, but that is all their information. So those are just a couple of ways that you might just bring some opinion writing into your classroom and share different ways for students to actually make comments and share with their classmates their thoughts. That could be very helpful, just so that students practice these skills that really do bolster not only their confidence, but their voice in the world, and which is, of course, the ultimate goal. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and just see if there are any questions. I did see in the comment, there is one comment about schools kind of locking down the ability to record. That is something that happens in some districts. That is something, if you have a particular need for students to record, you may be able to talk to your tech person to see if an accommodation can be made for your class. It's also something that you can do kind of as a home project too, where students work with their families to record themselves at home. So that's something to do too. And right now, when we live in this time of videos, phones and smartphones, parents can record their child on their smartphone. And if you create a Google form, they can upload that to your Google form and it'll automatically go to your drive. So that's maybe one workaround, but definitely reach out to those tech people. They can make magic happen in your district. And if they understand your why, they might be able to work with you to make things happen. With that, oh, and I do see someone said Flipgrid. Yes, Flipgrid is a super easy to use tool. It's free. I think it's still free. It's free to use, and it's very good for this kind of work, for the recording. And you can put links and share those grids with everyone.
I just want to mention real quick, if anyone does teach social studies and has an interest, I have some pretty extensive listservs in social studies for sharing resources And ideas, you don't have to be in Wayne County by any means. They're divided by grade level. So that's proven to be very helpful for people. So all I need is, I just put in the chat email. If you email me what your grade is. Now, if you're high school, that's different. In high school, I need to know, are you a U.S. history teacher, a world history teacher, a civics teacher, or an econ teacher? And all the other levels, I just need your grade, though, okay? And then there's a distinct group for that. So just wanted to throw that out there. Again, you don't have to be from Wayne County. So thank you, everybody.
And then as a final goodbye, we are putting a link to the Summer Blitz calendar in the chat. If you are interested in attending more sessions, please sign up. If you're kind of interested in a topic, but you don't think you can make it to the live session, no problem. Just sign up and we'll send you the video once it's processed and ready to go. So if there's something that kind of piques your interest and you think, you know what, I might have time in November to read that or watch that, feel free. But thank you all for coming.